Hello and welcome back for episode number 21. This is Doug Hewlett, and I have with me, as always,
Oh,
say your
Brett.
name. You're just staring at me like
No.
like a,
I thought you forgot my name. I was like, gosh, I thought we
you-
were closer than that.
you're
Okay.
staring at me like a cow looking at a new gate. You just kind of well.
I don't
Anyway,
know what
your
that
name's
stare
Brett
looks.
Atterbury. Let
I
me
don't know what
just
that stare looks like, but I believe you.
yeah. So Doug Hewlett with me as always, Brett Atterbury for episode number 21, and I think we're going to talk about how not to take our spouses and our significant others for granted. I think that's the direction we're heading for this episode. But anyway, Brett, say hello or something smart.
Hi, Doug. Not going to say anything smart. A little too early in the morning for that, but hey, good to see you. It is Memorial Day, so it's Monday. Is this the first time we've recorded on Monday? Probably.
No, we did a Monday night once because
All right.
you had a doctor's appointment or something.
You should have said another doctor's appointment.
Yeah, another doctor's appointment.
Spend a lot of time with the doctor these days. You got that to look forward to in 10 years, buddy. Nothing you can do about it.
What is your plan for this beautiful Memorial Day weekend here in Central Texas?
Well, I am moving in a week, so I am busy preparing for that, getting stuff packed up. So this time I said I'm not going to wait till the last minute, and I've done a pretty good job of getting prepared ahead of time. And so I think this is going to be a pretty easy move for me. So
Excellent.
not the most exciting way to spend a Memorial Day, but hey, it is what it is.
It
How
is
about
what
you?
it is. Well, I did a little camp out with my daughter last night, outside camping in the 90-degree weather. It was awesome. Didn't sleep because it
You're
was really
sweating.
hot,
Yeah.
hot and sticky. We ended up finishing our camp in the house because she woke up with a tummy ache. So we had to move it inside, which was nice. Although we did still sleep on the floor. So. And then today we actually have one of our neighbors. Their son is home from a deployment. He's a Marine, and we're going to go over and celebrate and welcome him home and have a nice little barbecue.
When you were camping out where you are, since you're way out there in the middle of nowhere, did you hear any like varmints like running around scavenging?
No, it's funny. So we have two barn cats. Well, we have three barn cats, and they sat vigil. Like seriously, they just like sat next to the tent protecting us. I don't know, but they laid outside of the tent all night. Because when we woke up in the middle of the night to come in, like it actually startled me because I saw, this thing jump down and move, and I was like, oh, that's Tito and Pumpkin. We're out there watching out for us. But lots of birds, so you can hear. There's a bird here called a Chuck Will's widow, and it makes a very specific type of call at nighttime. It's an ugly bird, makes a beautiful sound, but we could hear that all night. And frogs.
I think the few times I've stayed with you, you tried to get me to hear that thing, but it just has never cooperated, if I recall.
Well, next time you come, you can sleep outside. You'll hear it.
That's a very neighborly way to treat your friends.
Well, I just want you to experience nature.
Do you remember, what was that? Caddyshack? You ever watch that?
Yeah.
We got the pond and the pool. Pond would be good for you. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, let's dive in, Brett. Kick it off.
Yeah. So was having some, first of all, since it is Memorial Day, we were talking about, obviously, a prime example of, now I'm going to say men here. I realize there's some women involved in this as well, but since this is for men, so it's a prime example of men doing hard things. The ultimate hard thing, giving your own life for the common good. And as you and I were discussing, when I say millions, I don't know, if a lot of men had not done that, you and I would not be having this podcast right now, and people wouldn't be listening to it right now. So it's just incredible to think, men would just run into the firing line, if you will, and give their lives for that. And incredible testament to that. It also reminded me, though, that we forget that, and I talked about this in my talk in Oklahoma a few months ago, the tooth to tail concept. So the ratio of basically how many support troops it takes to support one frontline troop, and it depends on the war, and that ratio is all over the place. But in general, you could say it's 10-1. It takes 10 people behind the lines to support one frontline troop. And so, for obvious reasons, I think it's the frontline troops in the movies and the awards and the medals and all that. They get all the accolades. But they would be the first to tell you, without the 10 behind the line, they can't do anything, right? So it's a team concept. So in my mind, I had both of my grandfathers were in the military, but not in combat. One was in the Philippines, but he was a truck driver. And my other grandfather worked on an Air Force base, Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City, making like little parts for planes. Did that his whole life. So they're a big part of it too, right? So when we're remembering these warriors, got to remember the folks behind the lines as well that empowered all of that to happen. So got to keep them in mind. But anyway, we were talking about men doing hard things, and then it just happened to be that I came across this article, which was talking about spouses and how over time spouses, and this goes both ways, but we'll stay focused on men towards women because that's what we do, but how men, for example, can just really let that relationship start to not take priority in one's life. And what does take priorities? Well, job, busyness of all kinds of things. We live in a culture of, we're so blessed that we have so many things we can do, but we're like doing a lot of stuff all the time.
Hobbies.
Whatever, at home, outside of the home, there's just all kinds of stuff we can be doing. And we start doing those things. And suddenly, and again, I'm not sure I don't think it's a conscious thing where you like lay out your priority list and your spouse falls to the bottom. I don't think, gosh, I hope not. I hope no one's consciously like deprioritizing their spouse, but it just seems to kind of happen, right? As life goes on in the busyness of life, and we start to, and you and I before this we were talking about it. I like the phrase you use because I think it's exactly right. We start to take our spouses for granted, like it's just a given, if you will, that they're going to love me, support me, just like it was in the early days of the relationship. And I thought it was really curious as I thought about it. I pointing the finger at me too, man. It's like, gosh, we do that. Like, why do we let that happen? And so that was kind of what we were talking about.
It's funny how you do it, but you have the expectation that they uphold their end of it, right? You're like, well, I'm busy with work, but my wife signed up to love me and take care of me. And, these things should be happening and they're not happening. Well, therefore, and then you pull away and, it's funny though, that you sometimes look at the situation and go, well, they're not upholding their end of the bargain. It's like, yeah, but you haven't been upholding your end for the last 5 years. I don't know why my thinking is that it's not a conscious decision, as you said, but it's like when you're driving a car. Well, I feel a sneeze coming. Excuse me. There may be another one. There may be another one. But like when you're driving a car, right? You're not actively thinking about the RPMs and you're on the highway and the speed. You're just kind of steering. You're not focusing on modulating the speed necessarily. You're just, well, I'm moving with traffic. I'm going to make sure I keep it in my lane. And you sort of just take for granted the fact that the engine is spinning at the right RPMs and you're moving at the the right rate. You're not actively thinking about all of the different variables that you need to think about in order to get from point A to point B. And I think we sort of just say, okay, my relationship is locked in here. It's on cruise control. I can focus on these other things because I have so much confidence in the relationship that I can focus on.
Bless you.
Excuse me. And there it is. You can focus on the career or the priority of the moment, the priority du jour, right? But when too much time goes by focused on other things, suddenly that becomes the new standard and the new norm. And,
Yeah.
then you're just people living in the same house.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. It's back to taking someone for granted. We use that phrase a lot of times. I think we don't mean that we have like, or when we use that phrase, we kind of like say it's like a very negative kind of thing, which it is, but I think it's a little more complex than that. So you can take someone for granted and still love them deeply. But to your point, because it becomes so familiar and you just trust that it's there, your cruise control example, and that's good. So I'm just going to leave that running. And I think what we're forgetting is that cruise control is it's an object, it's a mechanical thing, it's got some software involved, but based on code, but it's not a human being, right? It's not a person. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need this continual attention, loving and nurturing that, cruise control doesn't need that. Human beings need that. No matter how psychologically, spiritually, physically strong and stable a person is, it's like, well, drop them on an island by themselves for a year and see how they come out of that experience. They'll be like a total mess, right? Just like most people, unless you're like Henry David Thoreau or something. But the vast majority of people would like walk out after 365 days. You remember, what was that movie with Tom Hanks?
I never saw it.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, he's abandoned on the island, and for some reason, it was a plane crash. So there was still like some debris. One of the debris was a volleyball. And so he starts losing his mind. I don't know how long he was there, years or something. He starts losing his mind, and he draws like a face on the volleyball and puts some hair on it. Calls it Wilson. There's a Wilson, the company. And that became like his friend, talking to the volleyball, because he just started losing his mind because he didn't have human interaction. So it's like it's so like, it's just a mistake for us to not continue to nurture that relationship, right? Easy to say as we're sitting here kind of analyzing it, but I've screwed that up countless times. And, I guess it gets down to, it's like, how do we, knowing that that's the case, how do we, and if even in the midst of, let's say you hadn't really been paying a lot of attention to your spouse for years, maybe, but I still think if someone like sits you down in a quiet room and gives you a piece of paper and a pencil and says, write from 1 to 10 the top priorities in your life, your spouse is going to be 1 or 2, or certainly top 3, right? I was like, well, you don't act that way. Well, so it's like, how do you be intentional about getting back to, like, if these are truly your priorities, isn't that where your time should be spent, right?
But here's why I think that may happen. I'll peel a layer of the onion. I think of, right, one of my oldest friends and best friend is in the service. He's a naval aviator, and I don't get to see him often. We don't get to talk all the time because he's busy, and I'm busy and he's busy. But we will pick up, when we do get to see each other and hang out or catch up on the phone, it's as if no time has passed.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think as men, a lot of times, we have relationships. We have lots of male relationships with friends, people we call friends that we don't talk to very often at all. And we know that they're our friend. We don't need to check in with them every week. We don't need to, go spend special time with them. But as men, we look at our relationships and we go like, oh yeah, well, he's good. Like I checked in with him a couple of months ago. He was good then. I'm assuming he's good now. Maybe next month I'll give him a call. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, when you spend so much time with your spouse, you kind of lump them into that, like, hey, you're one of my best friends. And I'm going to treat you like I treat my other best friends who are guys. And those guys, I talk to every once in a while. We get together, tell some stories, and I'll see him again in 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's just not inherently how we're wired, because we go off and take on our career and we start working, and the friendships that you had in high school and in college, you can't partake in them the way you did when you were in college with no responsibilities. But now you have a spouse and you have a job and you have all these responsibilities suddenly. And the way you treat those friends that you had in school, unfortunately, maybe when you have all of that familiarity with your spouse, you kind of like, oh, well, it's good, right? Like I see you every day. I don't even see Mike, but once a year, and look how close we are. So I see you every day. Clearly everything is fine. I don't know. My thoughts.
Yeah, it starts to look like that familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. Because to your example of your friends, I was thinking about some of my friends as well, guy friends. What if suddenly they had to become your roommate, like day to day?
Mm-hmm.
Would you would you have that same love and affection for them after 365 days? Maybe not. Hey, Mike, I love you, but I think it's time to go. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if part of our brokenness is this this seeking out of novelty. In business, I call it's a little bit different. It's kind of the same thing though. It's chasing the next shiny object, right? Instead of like really getting down hard working on what you've got in front of you, the project and program that needs to be executed well, and then even after it's launched, has to continue to be taken care of and nurtured and grown. It's like, okay, that's not as exciting anymore. Back when it was in the idea and launch phase, what's
Mm-hmm.
next? And I've got that, so I have to fight against that pretty hard. And I just wonder if that's part of it. It's like, well, this person's here day after day after day after day, and the novelty wears off. And
Okay, so we all obviously know the problem as a man in a relationship. I think you hit the 1 year mark in any relationship. Whether you're married or dating, and I think that could certainly be the pitfall, right? Is falling into that. How do you continue to treat them as a priority?
yeah,
So why don't we turn our attention and our focus now on ways, things that we know maybe that we don't do but we know would work, or suggestions or things that you have seen work, or maybe what you've done that did work. I think that would probably be good, because right, it's easy to sit here and say like, yeah, well, I stopped paying attention to her, and we could spend the next 20 minutes talking about how we do a terrible job. Why don't we offer some suggestions to our one listener, whoever you are? Thank you for listening. Why don't we offer some suggestions on ways that we could turn the table on this?
because that's not as fun to offer. It's more fun just to wail on people. Um, so I'll tell you what I read in the article, and then I'll tell you at least a couple of things that I do. But I'm starting to think I need to do more. But the article said, look, this is back to taking action on priorities. Well, before you can take action on priorities, you have to know what your priorities are. So I think if you sat down and you were real honest with yourself and you wrote down your, let's say, top 5 instead of top 10, the top 5 priorities in your life, and your spouse is not on that top 5, you probably have a different issue that you need to deal with, which means I don't want to pursue that too much, but I think you can imagine what I'm talking about. But assuming that your spouse is either 1 or 2, if you're a faith-based person, God 1, spouse 2, well, over here on my daily sheet of what I'm doing in terms of time, the precious commodity that we all have a limited amount of, am I using that towards my priorities? Pretty simple. So what's an example? And I think, my answer from my past is usually probably not balanced like it should be. Putting my tendency is to focus way too much on my work, my professional work, kind of idolize that. I've gotten a lot better at it, but that's typically my tendency. So how do you fight against those tendencies? The recommendation is be very intentional about, on a weekly basis, for example, the example the article gave was date night. So you don't say, honey, we're not spending enough quality time together, just the two of us. Maybe a date night would be a solution to that. And then she goes, you know what? You're right. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. It's like, no, at 7 o'clock every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m., I'm just making that up, 7 to 9 p.m., it's date night. And we prioritize this as it's as important as, a job interview or whatever, something that you would not miss. You cannot miss. You don't just reschedule it because, something else came up. In other words, only a critical emergency could actually move this date night, the 7 to 9 p.m. on Wednesday. So it's set in stone. And by making that move right there, you've basically given the message to your wife how important she is to you, because you're saying nothing else is going to come in and move this at all, right? No work thing, nothing like that. It's even takes priority over the kids. We have to find a way to babysitter, whatever, kids go over to the neighbor's house, whatever. And I think right there, it's such a small thing when you think about it. I don't think that's that hard to do. Might be some adjustment period, but you're setting it in stone. You're cementing a habit. And to me, that's kind of the key. It's starting to develop habits around making sure that your spouse, your significant other, knows that they are the priority in your life. I have a habit of just when I get up in the morning, just texting messages, nice morning messages. So I don't miss that. Doesn't matter what day it is or anything. I make that a priority. It's like it's going to happen. My routine is more or less something like this: wake up, go to the bathroom, and then on my knees, offering up prayer for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, just depending on what's going on in my life. And then that texting to my significant other is the next thing, because I want her to know that she's the priority in my life. So there are other things too, but that's just an example of some kind of habit that you put into your life to make sure that you don't forget it. Because if you don't cement something in like that, the business of life's going to take over and you're just not going to do it. You're just going to forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts. Yours?
Well, we have we have a young daughter, and certainly we don't have neighbors the way people do in like a normal neighborhood. We have neighbors, right, but they're not next door. So I can see,
horses and cows and deer are your neighbors.
Yeah, we just duct tape her to a neighbor's donkey. Then we go have a date. No, there are certain pragmatic things that we have to try and figure out, but
Yeah.
we're equally as guilty, right? This has been a really challenging year.
Yeah.
We, haven't had the resources to do things, to hire babysitters and go away or go on date nights. So we've had to, when we make time for each other, it's here at the house,
Yeah.
local. But I know I'm guilty of this because in trying to navigate this transition from white collar world to blue collar world and just digging ourselves out of the hole, it forced me to rely so heavily on my wife. I mean, I never would have been able to make it through if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
And then I haven't repaid her by showing her how important she's been to me by making specific time for her. And that's a real shortcoming on my fault. I mean, on my part, I feel pretty rotten about, not having made the effort. All right. For Christmases and birthdays, historically, I've always made her presents because I never had time, right? I had plenty of money, but I just didn't have the time to do that. And that was my way of showing like, you are important to me. I'm going to find time somehow to make you a gift. Cause I could just go to the store, throw down some money and buy
Doug,
you a gift.
you mean like handcraft something?
I would hand make her presents.
Wow. That's so cool.
But like, what would she rather have? Something that I took time to make her or take time to be with her, and that's, like I said, there's a lot of things that I don't do well. And this past year has really shown me that this is one of the things that I didn't do well. I prioritized, I don't want to say the wrong stuff, but I turned my attention away from my wife and focused it on what I told myself was mission critical, right? Like, get money in the door, right? Like, what do you need to do that? And then unfortunately that took so much brain power and effort and energy that it was just exhausting, that there was nothing left at the end of the day, the end of the week. And that unfortunately has suffered. Now we have a very good relationship. We have a strong relationship, but from here on forward, I need to do a better job of showing her that she is a priority and not just saying she's a priority.
Doug, it hit me that when you were talking about the gift that you handcrafted, which is awesome, and gave to her versus, for example, like an hour of your time, which we'll never get back, right? An hour, that's the time. The value of commodity is spent, it's gone. And an hour of your attention on her. So it's not just an hour of being together, because you can be together and mentally be totally separate and somewhere else, right? But what was clearly an hour of like just attention focused on her. And that to me is like, that is a gift. What's the MasterCard thing? Priceless, whatever. That's like the priceless gift, There's nothing. And I start to wonder if we would start to maybe reflect more deeply on how valuable we are. I'm going to say as men, how valuable we are as men, but obviously it applies to all human beings. How valuable we are as men in the eyes of God, what gifts we are to humanity, and certainly what gifts we are to our spouses. And with that understanding and realization, and I don't mean it in an egotistical way, I mean it in like a objectively factual way. It's like we are incredible gifts. And then to know that, and then you're going like, you're the most incredible gift you could give to your spouse, even for an hour. Like if you're the incredible gift that Doug Hewlett is, giving that self gift to your wife for an hour, time and attention focused on her, what could be better than that? There's no like tangible thing that could ever be better than that,
I'll say here are some other maybe practical things. If you have children, I know for my wife, acts of service are a big way that she knows how much I love and care for
Yeah.
her. So I don't leave my dishes in the sink and expect her to do them, right? I mean, it's like if I see dishes in the sink, I do those things so she doesn't have to do those things. I think also, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think spending time with our daughter
Mm.
shows my wife how much I care about the family, right? It's easy to be like, I'm the breadwinner. I got to go do these things. I don't have time for that. And, but
Right.
to make time for our child
Mm.
relieves, I don't want to use the B word, right? But takes pressure off of her. But it also helps me to forge a relationship with my daughter, which I think is so incredibly important as a father.
Yeah.
But it gets, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to justify how I've been prioritizing my time this last year. But I don't want guys to think that the only way you can show your spouse that you love them is by doing date night, right? Like there's
Yeah,
a
for
lot of
sure.
other things
Oh, for
that you
sure.
can be doing, and it's being present to your family.
Yeah.
You and I both have had an interesting background in our careers, and at a certain point, I realized that as I was trying to pursue more money and more status in my professional career, ironically, it took me away from home more
Yeah.
and more and more. And
Funny how that happens.
yeah, and realizing that, okay, well, I've got a decision that I have to make here. I could continue to pursue those things at the expense of my marriage, at the expense of the relationship with my daughter, our friends, whatever, just not being around. And I got to a point where I was like, I can't do. I'm not going to take that job. I'm not going to apply for that promotion because
Yeah.
um, it's going to take me away too much, and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So
It reminds me for the Christian folk out there who know the New Testament reasonably well. This is the part where it says, "Store up for yourselves treasure in heaven." Right.
mhm.
And so when you go back to the great commandment, love God with all your heart, soul, all your strength, love your neighbor as yourself. Most important neighbor being your spouse, of course. Um, that time, I agree. It's not just about date night. It's about attention, focused attention and service and
Intentional,
love
yeah.
on your spouse, where she knows that she's receiving this great gift of love and time and service from you, not distracted. It's not like you're doing it begrudgingly because, oh gosh, I think my wife needs this from me. And, you're whining and complaining about it the whole time. It's like you're being a cheerful giver. So they just say. So to me, that's as you evaluate, like how you're looking at your day or your week and your month and where you are, it's like, well, this is the most important thing you could do outside of if you're a faith-based person, outside of your worship of God. And like, how are you spending your time? I mean, this is what, if you were like a cost accountant going into a business, like valuing things based on how things are being done, and you're sitting there with the ledger, putting things in buckets, like simply your waking hours, like how are they being spent? And if you're sitting there at the end of a week, which would be what, like, I don't, can't do the math. You're a math guy. I'm kidding. But if you're sitting there, you're sitting there going, oh, look, I spent, single digit percentage of my attention on my spouse. Oops, you know, you got to reprioritize something. And I
Mhm.
think, Doug, because you mentioned acts of service, for those of you who have heard of the love languages, there's some book,
Yep.
and maybe the book is called Love Language, the 5 love languages or something like that. You can take that, or more importantly, have your spouse take the test. It takes, I don't know, it doesn't even take 10 minutes online, because you might be surprised that you don't know your spouse as well as you thought, in terms of like what really matters to her in terms of how she likes to receive love, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what the 5 are. Acts of service is one. Gifts is another one. I think time, just spending time together is one. And there's a couple others. But gosh, like know that. At least go out and find out. And it's not, bless you. It's not
Thank
like
you.
you can just ask her. Like she needs to take this test. If you just ask her, like, oh, I don't know. But the test like teases out those
Yeah.
questions where she's going to have to answer them and you're going to know like what her priorities are. So for me, I found out for me, like I couldn't believe this. I had an actual 0% on one of those 5. And that was gifts, right? I'm not if someone gives me a gift, oh, thank you. But it doesn't like, it has like 0 impact on me for like, gosh, I feel so loved because someone gave me that box of chocolates or something. But that's just me. But you got to find out like what it is in your spouse that really the way she likes to receive love. Go do it.
Do it. Figure it out and do it.
Yeah.
Be intentional.
Amen.
Well, awesome. I think
Is that
that's a
enough
good
wisdom
landing
for
spot.
today for you?
What's that?
Is that enough wisdom for the day for you?
I mean, Brett, every moment that I get to spend with you on this podcast is a gift. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if my wife should be on this podcast with you, with you. Just that's my gift to her is the opportunity to listen to you speak. Yeah.
You're welcome, brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the problem is people that listen to the audio part, that sounded like so arrogant. You're welcome. It's like you just see the visual cues here. We're obviously joking.
Well, no, this is great. Thanks for taking time today to sit down and talk again. And we'll see everybody here next week.
All right. See you, brother.
Take care.